home with her two daughters, Carmelita and Janita, at their home in El Lago, obviously overjoyed, and we're hoping to be able to get that sound up now, live if we can.
Between the president and the carrier, and we also had an opportunity to talk to our husbands. And I had been listening to him for 8 days, and it seemed very good to be able to talk to him.
How did he sound, Mrs. Cooper?
Just great.
It sounded fine. Did you see any of those pictures?
I heard that conversation also.
Was the telephone conversation ever completed? Were you able to hear him and then reply, and could he hear your reply, or did they have to relay?
No, we had a two-way communication.
I heard there was some trouble about it, but you could hear all that?
Oh, yes. It was very good.
When will you see it?
We hope to see them when they come back to Ellington.
And not before?
No.
You're not going to the Cape, then?
No.
Could you step up to the microphone a little bit? What was the, sort of most exciting part of the flight to you?
Well, it was all exciting to me.
Were you ever worried at all about it?
No, I was glad that they could go full 8 days.
How about you, Cal? You're a pilot, practically. Can you come out here? Can you come over here a little bit? What about you? What was the most interesting part of the flight to you?
Well, I don't know. I guess it was mainly the very beginning, but it was also interesting.
How would you like to be an astronaut, Karen?
I don't know. I think it'd be interesting.
Mrs. Cooper?
I think perhaps it was.
What about your plans now? This is your anniversary. You're going to have a big celebration. Could you walk over here a little bit? Have a big celebration tonight?
I have no plans for an anniversary celebration without my husband. I think we'll
Wait
wait
till he comes back home?
Yes.
What do you think his first meal, what do you think he'll want to eat after this? They said he could have anything he wanted on the carrier Champlain. Do you have any idea what his favorite thing will be?
I have no idea.
How about a
Cooper,
vacation?
Would you compare this flight with the last flight? Were you more nervous this time than last, or vice versa?
I wouldn't compare the flights. They were completely different.
I mean, the pressure on you. Were you more excited or more nervous this time than the last time?
It was very difficult to compare because of the length of the two flights. The girls and I are now going in the house, and then we're going to go to church this morning.
Is that the 11 o'clock, sir?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cooper. Thank you.
Thank you all.
That's astronaut Gordon.
Jane Conrad, with the NASA protocol man, is just arriving home from mission control. She left in a great flurry of excitement in order to get over in time for the president's telephone call, and promised on her way out that she would make a statement on her return. So the press is now about your reactions to the flight over there.
Well, what can I say except this is the happiest day of my life.
Mrs. Conrad, you just spoke to your husband and you heard the president's conversation. What's your reaction to this goodwill trip that seems...
In 3 days.
And I said, that's what you think, because
at when the splashdown came.
maybe Peter would like to answer that one.
Peter, which was most exciting part of the flight to you? Why don't you look up there so everybody can see you someplace except the roof?
When he came down.
Wait, Pete, you have had a very exciting time. Is this the kind of exciting life you usually lead?
No.
The television people and the press people have made it more exciting for you?
Yes.
I wonder if your grandmother would come over. This is Jane Conrad's mother, Mrs. Wynn DuBose of Uvalde, Texas. And Mr. DuBose was here for liftoff but had to go back. Mrs. DuBose, what was your feeling about all this?
Oh, I've never been so happy.
There's always a tremendous pressure, pleasure, and a tremendous relief from pressure.
You're right the first time.
To congratulate the flight crew, the flight operations crew, the program office, the manufacturers, the DOD support, the DOD launch team. It was a perfect absolutely wonderful example of man going into space. And I think every single member of that broad team deserves our heartfelt thanks.
Dr. Gilruth?
Oh, I think it's so true what Dr. Miller said. I'd like to say it again, maybe a little differently, by singling out the crew. I think the crew did a magnificent job here of not only endurance, but of having conducted all these experiments. And I think it's easy to overlook how busy and how much work is done by a crew in a flight like this. I'd like to congratulate also the people at Deke Slayton's that trained the crew. I'd like to congratulate Matthews and the Gemini Project Office for the coordinating all the activity that had to get done. Kraft and his team, I think, does get a lot of exposure, and I think everyone can tell much more easily what a wonderful job they do. I'd like to say that the spacecraft people, the McDonnell people, in my opinion, have again done a superb job. I think the way some of these headlines come out tends to overemphasize some of the difficulties that occur and don't give enough credit to all the hundreds and literally hundreds of systems that work perfectly. An 8-day flight of a device that has to be as complex as this spacecraft is really a great tribute to an outfit that can make something that will work in as tough an environment as that for all that time, and come up on retrofire like this did, and have all the separations clean, have the rockets fire bing, 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 and this is a great relief to a person like myself after an 8-day soak of all that equipment. And I think they deserve a tremendous amount of congratulation. I'd like to say again how much we appreciate the Air Force launch vehicle team, the Martin Company, and those people that put this in orbit. And also, I don't want to overlook the real good job that the Department of Defense does in the recovery zone. And I think this time was best of all as far as being able to tell just where you stood during the recovery. We were getting information that was just terrific, I thought. The information people were very good. I think I'd just like to say one other thing. As you all know, we're driving forward to go to the moon in this decade, and someone said there in Control Center, we've now qualified one of the subsystems for the mission. That's the crew. And I think I'm very happy, and I know all of my colleagues are, and I'm sure that Chuck Matthews sitting beside me here is happy. I'm not sure whether you're up next, Chuck, but I think you ought to be.
Mr. Matthews.
Well, I personally think this is the most interesting flight we've made to date in the Gemini program. We've done some things on this flight, like flying these fuel cells, which incidentally worked perfectly under some very unusual circumstances. But nevertheless, they'd probably go for another 30 days the way they were looking. We flew cryogenics on this spacecraft, cryogenic hydrogen, in a slightly different manner, and I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, we actually have flown this type of fluid now longer in space than anyone else. Hydrogen has been used in launch vehicles, for example, where it operates for a relatively short period of time. One of the big problems is storing these kinds of fluids over extended periods of time. This is very important, for example, for our lunar mission. So this is a big step forward. It probably hasn't been emphasized quite as much as it should be, as developing the technology for the advanced missions that we are looking forward to. We also, of course, flew a radar system. I was very pleased to establish that this did survive the launch environment. We turned it on. We did track the rendezvous evaluation pod before we had to break off activities. I was even more surprised that we tracked a ground target with it. As a matter of fact, Deke Slayton over there had suggested this, and I was kind of cool to it because I didn't think we'd make out very well. But we did track a ground target. We still have some problems with the radar and subsequent tracking that we're going to have to look into, but it was very encouraging that the new equipment worked out so well. And then just having equipment operate for 8 days, as Bob Gilruth mentions, is a fairly reasonable exercise of the equipment. At no time did I feel the spacecraft wasn't doing the job it was designed to. As a matter of fact, the type of flight we had really shows the flexibility that was designed into that equipment and the broad margins that exist in the operation. And I certainly do want to second the congratulations to McDonnell. The other point is that the launch vehicle receives hardly any attention. It works so well that no one says anything about it. And of course it runs for 5 minutes and then we fly the spacecraft for 8 days. But if we ever have a problem with the launch vehicle, I'm sure everyone will know all about it. And I do want to mention the fact that the reason no one's talking about it is it just operates just about perfectly. So that's sort of a summary of the technical aspects of this thing. And Paul, I don't know who you're going to have on next.
We'd like to hear from Lieutenant General Leathby Davis, the DOD.
Could you give us some idea of what you have observed with the heart rates before, during, and hopefully you may have heard after the flight, and what shape are they in?
Well, I'd just like to second what Bob Gilruth said here a few minutes ago, that we don't like to necessarily consider the crew as subsystems, and I'm sure Deke would second that. But we certainly have the first of any parts of the Apollo system that are qualified for the 8 days, and this was one of the prime points of trying to fly this mission, and I'm sure we all couldn't be happier because of that. Well, going back to the very beginning, we've observed in the rates during the mission that they have shown an adaptation to the weightless condition, and that in both crew members they have achieved some rates at somewhat lower levels than they had pre-flight, and so that they have leveled out at lower heart rates, and they were running in the 50s and 60s during the latter part of the mission. These rates were increased at the end, of course, and they both were ticking along almost evenly during the retrofire process, and they ended up at peaks of about 180 during that time. We got one blood pressure during that period of time, which was elevated, showed the capacity of the heart to respond to a given demand, and this blood pressure was elevated as we had expected it to be. As a matter of fact, it had a very wide pulse pressure on it, which was exactly what you would like to see at that stage in the game. As far as what has happened since, we have not seen any of the pressures yet from the carrier, or the ones that were recorded on the water are on the recorder, and we won't see those for a while. We will have some tilt data later today from the carrier and know how that is. But certainly from a symptom point of view, the crew has had no symptoms in the spacecraft. They had no symptoms after they were back on the carrier, and every evidence from our first reports from the Dr. Minners and Dr. Carpentier on the carrier would lead us to believe that we're as well off as we were with the GT4 crew.
Dr. Berry, you said that the heart seemed to have adapted to weightlessness. Is this the first time you have observed that adaptation?
Yes, because I think it's the first time we've flown long enough to see this. We saw the start of this during Ed and Jim's flight, and this time the curve carried out long enough that we can see it really happening.
Then the interesting part now, readaptation of the heart to 1G.
That's right. That's what we're trying to observe now, Roy.
Right.
Scan pictures of him?
Yes,
How did he look to you?
fine.
Oh, what about this travel thing? It looks like you're going to be doing some traveling. What was the most interesting thing of the whole flight to you?
Oh, it was all very interesting, and of course, the fact that the mission was completed was the greatest part of it.
Evidently, your conversation with your husband sort of didn't get out to the public. Were you aware of that, or did you think it was going out to the public?
We didn't realize that whether it was or not.
Can you tell us some of the things he said to you?
It was a private conversation, but we just spoke generally. We congratulated our husbands on their successful flight, and he also had a chance to talk to the girls, and they were excited about that.
It will really be 11 days before I will see him. Won't you be allowed to go to Ellington with the family to at least see him, if not really speak to him and get close to him?
Well, I'll be hoping that they'll change their mind, but I don't think they want us to see them for 11 days.
You think that will be more frustrating than these 8?
It probably will be worse than the 8, yes.
Did the boys have any special